Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of Melachim Beis, the second book of Kings. We are up to chapter 10. We are in the middle of reading through the story of Yehu and his coup and his violent takeover of the northern kingdom and how he overthrew the house of Ahab. And as I mentioned when we studied the ninth chapter together, I pointed out some points to ponder, some questions, some issues, so that after we complete studying the story of Yehu and his takeover of the kingdom, I'm going to take a podcast special to point out some interesting observations, which help us try to make some sense and meaning out of this very violent and gory story. But here we are now, beginning chapter 10. We left the end of chapter 9 after the assassination of the king Yehoram had taken place. The assassination, the king of the north, the assassination of Achaziyahu, the king of the south, had taken place, and the assassination of Jezebel, the wife of Achav. And her very ignominious end. Now we begin chapter 10 with the continued coup where Yehu takes aim at Achav's family. Ula Achav shivim banim b'shomron. Achav had 70 banim, could be translated as sons, but more likely means 70 children or descendants in Samaria. That's the capital city of the north. Vayichtov Yehu Sifarim, and Yehu wrote letters. Vayishlach Shomron el Sorei Yisrael Azakenim, and he sent to Shomron, to the elders of Jezreel, the elders that were in charge, Vil Ha'omnim, and to the those that were the guardians, or sometimes it means a nursemaid, those that were in charge of taking care of Achav's descendants. Of Ahab, of his descendants, Lamar, saying as follows. This is what the letter stated. Vi'ata, and now, Kivoa Sefer Hazeh Aleichem, when this letter actually reaches you, V'itchem B'nei Adonechem, and you have the children of your master under your charge, in other words, the children of your king, V'itchem Harecha V'yasusim V'yer Mipsar V'yanoshek, and you also have the chariots and the horses, and you're in the fortified city, and you have the weaponry. I want you to find among the children of your king the ones that are good and proper. I'm sorry, and you from among them, not the ones, but the one who is Tovi Yasha, the one who you think would be appropriate as the next king. Place him on his father's throne. V'hilachamu al beis adonechem, and fight on behalf of your father's house. Vayiru ma'od ma'od, right? In other words, he's saying, basically what he's telling them is, if you guys are loyal to your master, right, because you're watching the family, so you're loyal to the house of Achab, so go ahead, pick a king, put him up in charge, and I'll take him on, right? See how you guys have a fortified city, you have the weapons, the army. Go ahead, put him in charge, and I'll take him on. So they were very afraid. There were two kings, the king of the north and the king of the south. Couldn't stand up to him. How could we stand up to him, even if we were to find one of Achav's sons that we thought might be a worthy king? Vayishlach Asher al Abayis, and he who was in charge of the king's palace sent Asher al Ir, and the one who was in charge of the city, Vazikanim, and a panel of the elders, via Omnim, and those that were in charge of taking care of the children. They all sent El Yehu the following message, Lamar, saying as follows: Avodecha anachnu, we are servants to you. V'chol asher tomar eleinu nasa, whatever you tell us, we'll do. Lo nam lechisha tov benachase. We're not going to make anyone in charge. We're not going to appoint anyone as a replacement king. Just do whatever you think is right in your eyes. So Vayichtov Aleim Sefer She'enis Lemar, he wrote them another letter saying as follows. Im li atem, if you are with me, ulekol li atem shomeim, and you're going to listen to me, kechu es roshei anshe v'nei adonechem, take the heads of the people who are descendants of your master, uvo elai ko'es machar Yisrael, and come and bring them to me at this time tomorrow to Jezreel. Uvnei hamelach shivimish, there were 70 of them. Es gedolei ha'ir megadlim osem, the important people of the city were the ones that were protecting them and raising them. Vayihi kivu ha'sefer aleim, when they got this book, vayikhu et bnei hamelach, and they took the king's children, who were obviously trusted them, but vayishchatu shivimish, and they slaughtered 70 people. Vayasimu es rosheim badudim, and they put their heads into baskets. Vayishluchu elav Yisrael, and they sent them to him, to Jezreel. Vayavo hamalach, then the messenger came, vayagid lo lemar, and they told him as follows. So they sent this very, very, very gruesome, hard to even fathom delivery. So the messenger comes to Yehu to say, they brought the heads of the descendants of the king. Vayomer simu osam, place them shnei tziburim, in 2 big piles, pesach hashar ad aboker, outside the gate, and let them sit out there until the morning. Vayiv aboker, and it was in the next morning. Vayetze vayamod, and he went out and he stood. Vayomer el kol ha'am, and he said to everyone, Tzadikim atem, you are all righteous. Hine ani kosharti al Adoni, I have rebelled and conspired against my master. In other words, I was rebellious. I was disloyal. V'hargeo, and I killed him. Umihi es kolele, but who is the one that killed all of these people? In other words, you can have a problem with me because I was disloyal. I was rebellious. I should have stayed up for my master, so you can hold something against me. But who are the ones that killed all of these people? All of those people that were loyal to Achav went ahead and killed all of these people. Now, exactly what point is he trying to make here? It's unclear, and there's a lot of different commentaries, have different approaches. I would like to approach and say and I pointed this out while we learned chapter 9, is that Yehu, it seems that it was a known thing that Yehu was a potential rebel, that he was a guy who might stand up to the king. His loyalty was always under question. It's possible that it was known, the prophecy was always known, that God had asked Eliyahu to appoint Yehu to take over from the house of Ahab and to take vengeance against the house of Ahab, that this was something that was known among the public. So if you look at me and you see me, I killed the king, well, whatever, he's just a rebel, but we still believe in the king, house of the king. But now you see that even those who are loyal to the king, even those that had sworn loyalty and had been raising the children, even they turned against the house of Ahab, so it makes his cause sound more just. Du'u efo. Now you should know, ki lo yipol midvar Adonai arza. There isn't a word that God had predicted that what it literally means will fall to the ground. But what it means is that it will not happen. Every word that God had predicted will occur. Asher diber Adonai al beit Achab. Every word that God spoke about Achab, v'Adonai asas asher diber, and God has already done. In other words, even what hasn't been done yet, it's as if it's already been done. That which God has spoken. Biyad avdo Eliyahu, in the hands of his servant Eliyahu. So while Yehu is doing these acts, doing them in the name of God, he's going to repeat over and over and over again, these are the words that God spoke to his servant Eliyahu, his servant Elijah. Now, it's interesting because these are not words that were spoken to Yehu himself, right? He's doing this because of the words that were spoken to Eliyahu. The exact nature of the destruction of the house of Achav and how it should come about may not exactly have been described in this way. This is Yehu's interpretation. And this is important to remember and keep that in mind for when we have our discussion at the end. And now, these 70 descendants are gone. If you recall, there's a stark difference with what happened when King David took over after the House of Saul, and King David actually took it upon himself to take the remnants of the House of Saul. Once he had eliminated real opposition, he allowed the people, the descendants of Saul, of Shaul, to prosper, and he supported them and took care of them, even though, in theory, and many had advised against it. Yoav, if you recall back then, had advised against it because it was a potential for a rebellion against David, but he kept them anyway, right? But nonetheless, here, Yehu is not, and even after these 70 were killed, which you'd think at least this should be enough murder, enough mayhem. The House of Ahab is destroyed enough that they're not going to stand up again. But he went and continued to search for any more remnants of the descendants of Ahab. And Yehu went and then struck down anyone that remained from the house of Ahab in Jezreel. And not only his descendants, but anyone that was great in his administration, anyone that was friendly with Ahab, that knew him, anyone that were his priests. So this priests could, if it probably does not refer to the priests of Baal, because if it did, an episode that we're about to read soon, where he gathered the priests of Baal, right? Wouldn't make sense if he's saying that he killed Ad Bilti Hishalo Sarid until there wasn't a single one left. So not only did he kill the house of Ahab, did he kill the 70, or bring about the death of the 70 descendants who were potentially worthy of being a king in Ahab's place, right? But then he went, any descendant, even someone who did not have that potential, and not only descendants, but those who were friends, those that were acquaintances, those that were in his administration. This is way beyond what the prediction that God had told Eliyahu was. But this is Yehu's interpretation. Vayakam vayavo vayelach shomron, and he got up and he went to the capital, Beit Eked Haroim Badarach. And while he was traveling to Shomron, he passed through an area called Beit Eked Haroim, Beit Eked, which is a place where the shepherds used to gather, Badarach, on the road on his way there. And at that point, Yehu matza et achei Achazyahu melech Yehuda. He found the brothers of Achazyahu, the king of Yehuda. Remember, he had just had Achazyahu, the king of Yehuda, assassinated, the king of the southern kingdom, and now he finds his brothers. Now his brothers were also related to Achav through, because the families had married into each other. Vayomer miatem, and he says to them, "Who are you?" It seems to be a question that the answer was probably obvious. These people were probably well known as to who they were. Vayomer, but they said, "Achei Achazyahu anachnu." We are the brothers of Achazyahu. Vanered lishlom b'nei hamelach, and we are going down. We have come down in order to check on the peace. In other words, to pay our respects, to say hello to the sons of the king and the sons of the Bnei HaGvira, the queen mother. In other words, they say, we left Judah and we came up here to the northern kingdom to check on the king's household. I mean, they apparently had heard that something had happened to the queen mother, meaning Izebel. Now remember, they're related, they're cousins. So immediately, Vayomer Tifsum Chaim, he said, grasp them, take them alive. Vayitfisum Chaim, and they grasped them alive. In other words, rather than shoot them with arrows or whatnot. Vayishchatum el bar Beit Eked, and he had them slaughtered in the pit, which was there at the Beit Eked, in this place of Beit Eked. Arboy Mushnaim Ish, 42 people. V'lo Hisher Ish Me'am, he did not leave a single one of them alive. So again, this was not part of the command of Eliyahu, and the bloodlust and the lust for murder and revenge of Yehu has taken a turn that is way beyond his mandate, and it has become an absolute slaughter. And inadvertently, this also has a lot of terrible outcomes, because we're going to find out in later chapters, and I'm kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but the fact that many of these brothers of Achazyahu were put to death left a power vacuum in the south, which led to a terrible episode in the southern kingdom of Judah that we're going to learn about, the takeover of the evil queen Atalia, which was only possible because there was no one else left, and there was a huge power vacuum. But we'll get to that later. But I just wanted to put that out there. So now I'm going to stop here at the first half of chapter 10 as we continue on this path, this trail of murder and destruction and revenge that Yehu is embarking upon. And now, if you recall, in chapter 9, we discussed the discussion of the term meshuga, this of craziness, like with no thought, with no logic, with no reason, certainly with no compassion, with no heart, with no empathy, that a person that Yehu is described as. And now we see where that path takes one when one continues with this lust for revenge, how far it goes. But we're not even finished yet. So thank you so much for studying this part of chapter 10. Looking forward to studying the rest of chapter 10 with you. And of course the rest of this book of Kings. Thank you so much for participating. Take care and have a wonderful day.